Hey, what's up everyone? In this video, we're going to be looking at setting up fluid typography for your MyListing websites. This is going to be beneficial for everyone out there. So whether you've already built your site, you're building it now, or you've already built it and it's been running for several months. In my opinion, this is something that you could circle back to and absolutely implement even if you've been rolling it for quite some time. This is going to help you with scalability and manageability in the future. It's going to prevent headaches. It's going to save steps, save time. It's going to give a better user experience as people with different device sizes move up and down resolutions when using your website. That typography is going to be more fluid and it's not going to stutter, which hence the name fluid typography. It's just going to be a good experience regardless of what device or screen that people are viewing your MyListing website with, okay? So let's go ahead and dive in. What I've got pulled up here is the fluid type scale calculator. And we are, as you can tell, we're at the root domain for this tool. So we haven't done any calculations to it because as you'll see, the URL will start to dynamically change as we configure this calculator. We are not gonna get into the heavy geeky parts. There are tons of resources out there that you can look up. What is fluid typography? One of the other things we're going to look at as part of this is the clamp CSS function. You can do your own research on that. You can do your own research on how all of this stuff is calculated. For by and large, unless you're someone like me, you're not going to need to dive into or want to dive into all of this stuff. You're just going to want something that works in the broad strokes of how to set this up and something that's ready to go out of the box, which that is something I'm also going to provide you is the pre-made configuration. Okay. All right, so let's dive in and see how we would configure this calculator. There's typically two steps. If you really want to get super serious about it, there is configuring the calculator for your headings. Then there's configuring the calculator separately for your text. So that's different levels of body and paragraph text. I'm going to do a little hack here. That's going to allow you to do this calculator one time and use it. It's going to be good for the majority of the people out there, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and dive in and configure this calculator. The first thing we're going to look at is the minimum. So that's mobile, right? And we're going to set up the base font size. So again, our focus is headings here over everything else, setting up those H1s through H6 font sizes. But again, we're going to hack that H6 and use that as our paragraph and body. Okay, so what is the smallest font that we want to show on a mobile phone? So we're going to go with 20 pixels. Now, keep in mind, this is the base font, all right? We're doing what's called a baseline step here. And all of these calculations over here on the right, you don't need to concern yourself with them, is going off of that base font size, which we just set there, okay? All right, the next thing, how do we determine the screen size on mobile that we want to go with? Well, you can roll with what Elementor gives you in the default portrait mode for mobile, or you can go use, there's a website, I think it's called like Resolution Stats or something like that, and it'll give you the most widely used mobile screen device. You could do that. But we're just going to go and grab this from Elementor. So I've got a page that I set up here before this video. The only thing I did to this website is I installed the MyListing theme in the free version of Elementor. That's it, aside from creating a test page, as you see here, and then a test post with the same heading structure, okay? But what we want to do here is we want to go and down here at the bottom of our Elementor builder, we've got a responsive mode area. So we want to click that icon. We want to then go into mobile portrait mode, and that's going to give us a width of 360, okay? So that's what we're going to punch here in our screen width. We're going to leave this type scale as is, all right? Now, where does that type scale come from? Let's see if we can get this on the first shot. There you go. So this is an awesome website. I include this in the MyListing project template as one of the steps, but this is another free tool, but it's kind of like music scales. So as you go up here in the scales and they get larger, your fonts get larger, okay? Drop all the way down to a small scale, they drop way down. Okay, so you determine the scale that you want to have, and they give you nice options for the font weight if you want to see that. You want to see the different particular font, the line height, the spacing, the colors, blah, 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 blah. So that's a really fun tool. So we're going to just roll with the default recommended type scale here for mobile. Next up is the maximum base. I keep driving that home. The base, not the maximum overall font size, but the maximum base the calculations are based on. We're going to set this one to be a little higher than mobile. We're going to do 22. So 20 on mobile is the base and 22 base on desktop. Okay. What about our screen width on desktop? Okay. For that, we go back to Elementor. We can switch to the desktop view, but if you do that, you might be a little confused when you see the width here. It says 2260. That's not the content width. That's just the width of the viewport here. So we want to go over to our site settings in Elementor, and we want to pull up layout. Okay. By default, you're going to see a value of 1140. That's a bit small in my opinion, so I like to go to 1200. This is personal preference. Do whatever you want here. It also depends on the type of website you're building. If you're building a website that lends itself to wanting to be wider as far as the design, then extend that content width as desired. All right, so we're going to go ahead and update this. And we are going to go back to our calculator and we're going to punch this in. Okay, we're going to leave the recommended type scale ratio for this. You'll notice it's a little bit larger than mobile. That's exactly what you want, okay? This stuff we're not going to mess with because we're going to strip all of this out, okay? We're just going to leave everything else as is, nothing else left to do. Now, what you would do in this case is copy this to your clipboard and paste this into your website wherever it is that you manage your CSS. But that's not enough. You got to do a little bit more, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab what I have from the Canvas starter site here. And I'm going to paste it in. So I'm going to come over to the website. I'm going to go into WP Codebox. That's how I add all of my code snippets to my websites. I'm going to change this code snippet type to CSS. Let's call this, you would have to put this in your whatever CSS code snippet that applies to your whole website. So I'd actually call this global. And by not setting any conditions with WP Codebox, this is going to apply to the whole website. That's what you want because the fonts apply to the whole website. All right, so we're going to just dump this in. And as we see here, I've got a little comment at the top that says headings and body text. Okay. So here we're just declaring our values that we got from our calculator. So H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6, and then our body, okay? So we would want to punch that information in here, all right? Now, with our calculator, we've got these values, right? So here would be our H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and our H6. But like I said, we're gonna hack this. We're gonna ignore this last one. Or in this case, sorry, we're going to ignore the largest one here because for the Canvas site, we don't need it to be that large of a font for the heading, okay? But if you want yours to be that large, that's totally fine. So we're going to actually knock this one off, and we're going to use every one after that, all right? So I've already done that here in this code. So let's just quickly examine. H1, we're saying that our font size should be that clamp value of 3.05 rem, 2.15 VI, and plus 2.62 rem, yada, yada, yada. We verify that right here. 305, 246, 25, yada, yada. Okay, let's look at one more. Our H2 is 244, 136, blah, 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 blah. Here we go. 244. Actually, that looks different. I'm not sure why that calculated different, but you get the idea, right? You come up with this. I'm not sure why it's different in Canvas. We can actually, you know what? Let's just do this live. Let's do this for real here. I think I did something a little different on Canvas, but you get the idea. So let's do this. We'll go ahead and we will use all of these as is, okay? So we're going to say, okay, yeah, this is our H1. So we'll do this a little differently. You just have to trust that I'm grabbing these from my other screen the right way. So let's go back over here. Let's put this in for H1. That's going to give us that bigger font size for the heading H1. That's cool. Copy in my H2, copy in my H3. And like I said, I'm going to give you all of this, okay? And links to the calculator and all of that where you can make your adjustments. All right, so it's H3. Let's grab our H4. And let's grab our H5. Grab our H6. And grab our base font, also known as our paragraph and our body and all that good stuff. Let's punch that in. Okay, and let's save our changes and enable that snippet. Okay, so before we continue on, let's break down the rest of what is this other stuff that's in here. Okay, so we've got our font sizes, and another thing you might be asking yourself if you've ever designed websites, well, what does H1, H2, what does that have to do with font size? Like maybe sometimes I want my H1 to be small and not large. That's absolutely fine. This is, which you'll see in a second when we get over to the Elementor side of things, it'll all jive and make sense. It's just a way for you to visually in your head, a lot of times the H1 is the largest and the H2 is a little smaller and the H3 is a little smaller. It's just a way to visualize in your head instead of how I initially built Canvas was like extra, extra large, triple extra large, extra small. You know, doing it this way was a better way to do things. So I switched things up. Okay, it's just easier mentally in your head to grasp it this way, in my opinion. Okay, so we've got all that set. So what does the rest of this mean? Best practice is, in design for headings, for all of your headings, the line height should be 120%. Okay, I'll let you guys do the research on that. You know, do your own research if you want, but that is the best practice, and there was a calculation for it. Okay, so you'll see here for all the headings, we got a line height of 120%. It's consistent across the board. Now, one exception, when you get to H6, which is, you know, going to be a pretty small font. As you see here, it's 1.125 rem, which pretty much equates to 16 pixels, a little bit larger. Okay, it's a pretty small font, and the body here is 1 rem, which is 16 pixels. Okay, so because of that small font, we want that line height to be greater. Okay, so now we want to switch to a line height of 150%. Okay, this is a set once and forget it. This, because we're doing it in CSS, this applies to the WordPress block editor, which we will see in a second. And we're going to match this up with our settings in Elementor, so that way it doesn't matter what you create your content with, Elementor or the WordPress block editor, you're going to have the exact same fluid typography. All right, so that's that. The other thing to mention here is just the font weights. We're going to match that up too, and I just put 700 bold across the board here. You can do, you know, whatever you want, obviously. All right, so we have that saved. Now let's move over to, we don't need the calculator anymore. We need to move over to the Elementor side of things. So we're going to edit this page. Let's get out of our site settings. So what I've done here is I've added an H1. You'll see here in the HTML tag, it's got an H1 semantic tag for SEO purposes, okay? Under the style, we see that I assign, it's by default, Elementor assigns it to what's called the primary font, okay? Moving on down to heading 2, you'll see that I assigned heading 2 for SEO. The style is primary. So Elementor is just going to keep using that same global font size of primary for all of these. Okay, H3, style is primary. You'll see because that pencil is not activated that we haven't set a specific font size for these. Okay, what I wanted to show you as part of this though is, you know, if you don't set fluid typography stuff on this stuff, what happens? Okay, so let's look at that before we make any changes. But as you go down through here, you'll just, all of these are set, H4, H5, and so on and so forth. But it's all, again, for the SEO, the semantic SEO stuff. But all of the global typography, the fonts, is set to the primary. Okay, so let's look at this page on the front end and see what the problem is. All right, everything looks good on desktop, right? That's cool. So in responsive mode here in our browser, we're just going to start moving this down, shrinking this down. And you think, oh, that's not too bad. That looks good. That looks good. That looks good. But you see what's happening? The font size never changes. It just stays the same size and keeps wrapping the lines. You want, when you go to smaller devices, you want it to be fluid. You want it to shrink. You want those font sizes to shrink as the device shrinks. That's not happening here. That's what we're going to fix. Okay? All right, so we'll leave that there. The next thing we want to do is we want to set up our global fonts. All right, so we're going to come back to our site settings. What I see a lot of people do, and I made this mistake a long time ago when I first started out with Elementor, is you see this typography and it's like this bright shiny toy. Like this is where my typography goes. Like I got to go in there. That's where I set it up. You do not touch this area except for one piece. Well, I do. I set my link color here, but I do not touch any of this stuff here. This will screw with your SEO. This is only for SEO purposes, in my opinion. You just don't touch this. Leave this alone. You can set your link colors here if you want. One key pro tip, and assuredly, as soon as I publish this video, MyListing is going to fix this. But what you want to do, this is a pro tip because MyListing has an inaccessible font issue. You want to come in here, and the only other thing you set is set this font to one rem. Okay? By doing just that one step, well, there's two steps. That one step within Elementor, you fix the inaccessibility issue. If we go back to our CSS, I'm going to give you the code for that here. And here we go. This code I put at the bottom of my typography on MyListing websites. This works hand in hand with that pro tip setting I just gave you in Elementor to fix the inaccessibility issue. So you add this little bit of code, add that one setting in Elementor into the typography settings, and that fixes that issue. Hopefully they fix it so we can just not have to worry about that, but it's been an issue for a long time. Okay, going back here, we'll get out of the setting. We don't want to touch anything, and you absolutely do not want to touch any typography settings for MyListing. So if anyone tells you to go into the appearance and the customizer and typography, try not to touch any of this stuff unless you absolutely have to. This stuff is not responsive. You only have font weight options in pixels. You don't have the option to do anything that's mobile responsive. Definitely nothing as far as fluid typography. So you get to it that way, or you get to it through theme tools, theme options, and typography. They're going to send you there. Okay, do not go there unless you absolutely have to. I never use that section ever. All right, another pro tip. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is set up our global fonts. This is what is going to allow the fonts to be the most performance optimized as possible in terms of assigning the font styles across your whole Elementor site. This is the fastest performance-wise, not just the fastest to assign, which 1000% that's the case, but it actually improves performance across your site to do it this way. What a lot of people do, let's get out here real quick. And you may be in this situation. So what I see the mistakes a lot of people make is they come in here, they'll add their heading. Oh yeah, you know what? We're going to look at this on the front end. This will really help illustrate the problem. So you come in here and people will not know the difference, and they'll click that pencil next to the typography. They'll change the font family or whatever, and then they'll set the font size. Let's say, I think Elementor on their homepage uses a font size for H1 of 88. So let's just pretend that you did that. Now let's pretend like you went into all of these, H3, and you set just random stuff in here. You probably don't understand rem yet, which please adapt rem and don't use pixels. But you come in here and let's say you set, I don't know, you're like, oh, this looks good. Let's do 60 there, and let's go H5. Let's do, I don't know, I know it needs to be smaller. Let's do 30. Okay, let's do that. Let's refresh our page. Now, as we go down through our smaller devices, look what happens. That font never shrinks. Massive problem on mobile devices. We're not even down. Look at what width we're at. We're not even down to our width of 360 yet. Let's go down to that width that we defined. Look how bad that is. Okay? Not good. Okay, so we're going to fix that. Going back to our page, I'm just going to click on each of these and reset them. And this is just one page, guys. Imagine if you've done this all throughout your website, you've got a problem. You need to go back through the whole thing, reset those fonts, and use global fonts. All right, so I've reset everything back to the way it was. Let's go back to our site settings. Let's go into global fonts. And I'm going to turn off this style guide, or this, yeah, it's like turns off the style guide. So then you can actually see underneath kind of what we're playing with and see in real time what this adjusts. Okay, so this is where that H1, H2 thing comes into play. So instead of using the word primary, I'm going to use H1. That's probably going to be your primary. When you start a new page or a post, H1 is your primary, right? All right, let's do H2 for our secondary. Let's leave our text and our accent there. Let's then go down and add an H3, an H4, an H5, and lastly, an H6. This text right here will be, well, you can use that for our body, okay? Body paragraph text. Okay, so now let's go through and configure these. So I'm gonna move, now you know what I'll do, I'll just leave this up there so you can actually see what I'm doing. Okay, so H1, let's go in here. Now, you're going to want to set your font family, whatever you're going to use. I use system fonts for everything. I've got a guide and a video on how to do that, but let's just roll with the defaults, which is Roboto. We do not want to use pixel, so we want to choose the drop down, and we want to use this little pencil here, okay? Then we go back to our code, and we just grab the clamp portion of our code. You also need the semicolon at the end. And we're just going to drop this right in there, just like that. And then I'm going to set the weight to match what's in my CSS. You can do whatever you want here. So font weight 700, which I've set. And then I'm going to do my line height. Let me expand this a bit here. So let's do my line height. I'm going to change that to the pencil. And I'm going to do 120% to match my CSS. Okay, and I'm going to do that, like I said, for all of the headings except for the H6. All right, so we're done with H1. Let's grab our H2 code. Remember to adjust your font family. You don't want to have too many font families. That's another pro tip. That's just going to add more. It's going to slow down your website even more. That's just more fonts that need to load. Keep your fonts to a minimum. Usually like two at max. But if you use system fonts, you don't have to worry about it at all. It's just that issue goes away. Okay, so we set that bold and we do our line height again. Hit the pencil, 120%. Let's go to our text here. Remember, our text is this body. And we change from pixels to the pencil. We'll leave the font weight as it is. We want that line height, go back to the pencil, and we want to change this one, remember, to 150% because it's a smaller font. Our accent, we are just going to leave this. I'll let you guys tinker with this however you want. This is more of a personal preference, how you want to set up the accent. I like to typically do like an uppercase and then like maybe a little slightly lower font size here, but I'll let you guys tinker with that. Okay. All right, so next up we've got our H3. Come over here, we grab this. I'm going to fall silent here a bit. I'm just going to punch in all of this stuff. I think you get the idea now, and then we'll look at our results. All right, almost done. Coming to the end. Okay, so a little bit of talking through this last one. Again, the H6 is treated essentially like our body text. So this changes a little bit, especially on the line height side of things. Okay, so then remember our line height is just like our body. In this case, it's a smaller font. So we're going to do 150% on this one heading. Okay. All right. So now we've got all of our global fonts are now set here. Okay, to match what is in our CSS. So like I said, no matter what we create our content with, whether it's with Elementor or with the WordPress block editor, we now have a one-to-one match in our fluid typography. Okay. So this is the before. Let's go ahead and duplicate this. Well, before, one more, there's another step. We got to get out of our site settings. Now we need to assign our fonts. Okay, so let's go to our H1 here. And remember, real quick recap, our semantic HTML tag is H1. That is SEO. Just set that, don't mess with that. Our style is what we're doing here. So global fonts are set by clicking on this little globe. You do not want to use the pencil. Once you do that, you overwrite the global font. So by default, now everything is defaulting to our H1. Okay. So let's go to our H2. We want to change that to H2. We want to go to our H3. Change that to H3, and so on and so forth. Okay, and now our paragraph gets our text. There we go. That is a bit small there. That's fine. Okay, so we do see something that is odd here. Our H1 is a bit off. So we'll look at that. All right, let's go ahead and update this and refresh. It could just be this page is wonky. Could also be the font choice. Okay, there we go. So that's actually set now. Cool. Okay, but it doesn't matter that it's that big because you're going to see why in a second. All right, so now let's inspect this page and watch what happens when we shrink. See how the font size gets smaller too? So let's go all the way down to our mobile size. Okay, so that's that versus this. Oh, let's go. Let me punch this in. There we go. So if you were not to do fluid typography, this is what you would get. This is what you get if you do fluid. You see how that looks much better? Now, obviously, your heading is not going to be, it's probably not going to be that big depending on your site, and it's not going to have that many words. An H1 heading may not have that many words. It's totally up to you how you want to go about it. I kind of did like a worst case scenario here, but it doesn't even matter because it still looks fine. So let's get out of responsive mode. Let's go to just like the actual device here. So let's go like, where's an iPad? Let's go iPad Pro. That looks great. Let's go to an iPhone 12 Pro. That looks great. Obviously a desktop is going to look good. It's going to look good on every single device. That is my whole point here. It doesn't matter how big, how small it gets. It's going to look perfect. And the beauty, one of the other beauties is this, we're done. We no longer have to set, unless you have special use cases for going into the site settings and creating additional global fonts, you're done. Like, you no longer have to worry about going into each text element and setting it. So what if you were, I don't know, you were to add a icon box. Come in here and we go into the style tab, and then we go into our content, and we want to adjust like what do we want this heading size to be. By default, it's going to be our primary, which we've now renamed to H1. You just find that size that you want to have. Maybe it's H3, like that looks good. Maybe we want to go H4. And remember, this is not the SEO semantic values. This is just reference for size. You just know as you move down through the heading sizes, H6 at the bottom is going to be the smallest, H1 at the top is going to be the biggest. You just work your way down and you find something that you like. Okay, that's a good heading size. Now let's move on to the description area. So this text right here. What do we want that to be? Click on that little globe. It defaults to our text. That may be good enough. And it doesn't matter which widget you add in here. Do the CTA widget. It's one of my favorites. Although I wish they would do more work on it, but it's one of my favorites. Oh, that's a pro feature. That's why. Like I said, I've only got the free version in here. I don't know. What else could I do? That's all in pro. Could I do a button? Let's do a button. Okay, come in here under style. Same thing, typography, defaults to accent. What do you want that to be? You could set up your own button size as a global font, whatever you want it to be. I would do that. I would set up a button, a global font for a button. So I would come in here, site settings, global fonts. Let's add a new style. Let's call this buttons. Let's edit that. But before we do that, let's grab our H6 value. Let's say we want it to be the same. Let's go into our button. Let's change down to the pencil. We don't want pixels. Let's put that in there. So this is going to guarantee that our buttons are, 16 pixels minimum, give or take, adjust. We're going to use a weight of semi-bold for our buttons, and we're going to use uppercase. Line height, you do not want to touch with buttons. That should just be 100%, or i.e. don't change it. Okay, now let's go back here to our page. Let's adjust our button. Let's go to our set a global font of our buttons. There we go. And that might be too big. Let's say that's too big. Let's come back in here to our site settings, global fonts, buttons, and let's say that we actually wanted this to just be that one rim, which is actually our body there. Set it to that and refresh the page. There you go. That looks good. And you see what I'm saying? Then once you do this, you have all of your global fonts set up here. They're ready to go. And this is going to help the performance. Like I said, the manageability, the scalability, prevent headaches. You set it once and you forget it. No more going in here, and do not do this anymore. If you've done it, I would go back and fix it. At very least, don't do this anymore. Don't go into each button and click on the pencil and set it to something, because then you go to another page and you add another button, and you have to go back and you have to reference what you did in that other button. Maybe you just don't care, and you take a guess and you're like, oh, I think I made that like 22 pixels, but I can't remember. I'll just do 22 pixels, and maybe I'll do a different font family on this button, and this button has a different font family. You create this Frankenstein monster. I could pretty much go to pretty much every Elementor website. I should just say a majority of Elementor websites ever created, and you're going to find this. The buttons aren't the same typography. The headings aren't. They're just using random values all over the place, and it's not good. All right, guys. Like I said, in the video, I'll have links to all of this stuff. You can use exactly what I'm using here as a starting point, and it will look great. And you just adjust from there using that Typescale website if you want to, or you can manually go in here and tinker. I would use the calculator so that everything is consistent rather than just going in here and willy-nilly changing things. Make sure that you use the calculator so it's consistent across the board, okay? But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and this is really, really powerful stuff. And this is now implemented, like I said, on the Canvas starter site. So if you buy the Canvas starter site, this is obviously going to be in place. If you download the style kit for Canvas, which is a free download for anyone that has a MyListing Club account, it's now included in that style kit, and also in the global CSS package. So there's multiple ways to get this if you want it, or you just do your own calculations by following this video and do your own thing. But I've given you the tools and shown you exactly how to do this. All right, guys, like I said, hope you enjoyed this video, and I will catch you in the next one. See ya.